Proceed when you're ready.
Good morning and welcome to Team 505's presentation for the 2025 Fiscal Challenge. We aim to address the U.S.'s long-term fiscal responsibility while considering economic growth, social equity, and political feasibility. Let's begin by examining the state of the national economy and national debt. In the fiscal year of 2024, the U.S. federal government spent $6.9 trillion. For mandatory spending, there was $4.13 trillion, and for discretionary spending, a total of $1.8 trillion. To reflect the impact of rising interest rates on government borrowing costs, the net interest payments amounted to $881 billion. For 2025, the Congressional Budget Office projects that the federal deficit will reach $1.9 trillion, and for the next 30 years, that mandatory spending will increase to $14 trillion, discretionary spending at $4.5 trillion, and the net interest payments at $4.7 trillion.
The current state of the economy should concern all Americans. The primary concerns are the growing debt, high interest rates, and the increasing budget deficit. Since the last federal budget surplus in 2001, the national debt has grown steadily with major spikes during the 2008 financial crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. Despite the Federal Reserve's recent rate cuts in September, the 10-year U.S. Treasury yield has increased by 70 basis points from 3.7% to 4.4%, making debt servicing more expensive.
The current debt to GDP ratio is 124%, and the debt held by the public is 97.8%. The Congressional Budget Office predicts that by 2055, the gross federal debt will reach 179% of GDP, and the federal debt held by the public will reach 154.1% of GDP. This rising debt burden reduces fiscal flexibility, making it harder to respond to future economic shocks or policy needs. Our package of proposals is designed to see increases in federal revenue, enhance social benefits, and improve economic efficiency while reducing long-term spending, leading to a debt-to-GDP ratio of 92.93% by 2055. Our policies fall under the four components of GROW, which are green infrastructure, regenerative investments, optimal healthcare, and workforce upskilling.
Beginning with our first proposal under green infrastructure, we have CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. The U.S. is one of the largest carbon emitters. Since 2022, according to the Environmental Protection Agency, we have emitted 6 billion metric tons. While the U.S. works to reduce these emissions domestically, we are outsourcing pollution to countries without carbon pricing, putting American industries at a disadvantage. We propose to implement a carbon tax, specifically a $60 per ton CO2 tax on U.S. imports based on their carbon intensity, to ensure that foreign manufacturers pay the same carbon costs as U.S. industries. While this tax would make us more competitive in trade, doing so would raise economic challenges for developing countries and receive retaliatory tariffs from countries like Mexico, Japan, China, Canada, and Germany. Politically, carbon border taxes have seen left-leaning support, while right-leaning supporters have demonstrated interest in correcting the trade imbalance. Over the next 30 years, the implementation of CBAM would lead to revenues amounting to $2.4 trillion, total government savings of $1.1 trillion. Additionally, it will cut our debt to GDP by 4.74 percentage points while reducing emissions by 20 to 30% by 2050.
To put our domestic industries first, in conjunction with CBAM, we propose the Climate Resilient Infrastructure Program. This aims to modernize coastal infrastructure to reduce inefficiencies and support sustainable projects. Much of the current coastal infrastructure is outdated and deteriorating, slowing economic growth, increasing costs, and posing safety risks. This initiative would be enacted through a mix of federal investment and public-private partnerships, ensuring fiscal responsibility while addressing national needs. Other infrastructure bills, like the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, have shown bipartisan support over time. We propose a total investment of $120 billion to upgrade our infrastructure. Over the next 30 years, we would expect to see a reduction in government spending of $1.3 trillion and reduce our debt to GDP by 1.17 percentage points.
For our third proposal under green infrastructure, we have green bonds. As the U.S. transitions towards a cleaner economy, securing funding for nuclear fusion research, renewable energy, and grid modernization is essential. Our proposal calls for issuing U.S. green bonds, a financing tool that would support environmental projects without requiring new legislation. By leveraging U.S. treasuries and green bonds, this initiative would attract private capital, stimulate job creation, and reduce emissions. Globally, the U.S. already accounts for 1/5 of global green bond issuance. Support for green finance initiatives are growing on both sides of the political spectrum. A bipartisan approach would combine federal incentives with private investments, making green bonds a politically feasible and economically sound solution. To implement our proposal, it would be a one-time investment of $180 billion. By the 6th year of implementation, over the remaining 24 years, green bonds would boost economic activity and generate revenues amounting to $1.85 trillion, while reducing our debt to GDP by 4.4 percentage points.
Next, we have regenerative investments, starting with eliminating improper payments. Every year, the US government loses billions of dollars due to payments that should not have been made or were made incorrectly. Over the last 20 years, it has cost taxpayers $2.7 trillion. Our proposal eliminates improper payments through AI fraud detection, automated claim reviews, and enhanced oversight. The AI would detect suspicious patterns before payments are made, preventing fraudulent claims, duplicate billings, and improper unemployment payments. Automated claim reviews would reduce human error, ensure proper documentation, and issue household checks. Enhanced oversight would improve agency data sharing to prevent cross-program fraud and close loopholes that allow for misallocated funds. Over the next 30 years, with a one-time investment of $25 billion, eliminating improper payments using AI and machine learning would reduce government spending by $3.2 trillion and reduce our debt to GDP by 3.2 percentage points. This proposal has bipartisan support.
Moving on to our next proposal, we have Government iCloud. The U.S. government can enhance efficient fiscal responsibility by implementing a modern, data-driven economic management system inspired by Project Cybersyn. This integrates real-time financial monitoring, machine learning, and AI-driven analytics to optimize operations, reduce wasteful spending, and improve tax compliance across agencies. With an initial investment of $14 billion per year for 5 years, followed by ongoing costs of $4 billion annually over 30 years, this initiative would boost GDP by $2.5 trillion and generate $2 trillion in additional revenue. Over time, this technology will be expanded into healthcare, disaster response, and supply chain management. Politically, our proposal has bipartisan appeal, and it would reduce our debt to GDP by 8.2 percentage points.
Social Security is our most critical program in the United States. However, the system is under serious strain due to longer life expectancies, declining birth rates, and shifting demographics. Social Security is facing insolvency in the coming decades, so we propose the Social Security Sovereign Wealth Fund. It would require a total investment of $237 billion over the next 30 years. By investing a portion of these funds into diversified assets, such as equities and fixed income securities, we can increase returns and secure the program's long-term fiscal solvency. Research from a 2019 analysis by the Urban Institute shows that shifting just 15% of Social Security assets into equities could eliminate 40% of the program's long-term funding gap. By the end of the 30th year, a conservative 4% return on investments could generate $297 billion annually, helping to stabilize Social Security for future generations. In 2020, President Trump signed an executive order supporting the creation of a sovereign wealth fund, signaling potential bipartisan interest. With higher investment returns and smarter asset allocation, we could reduce the debt to GDP ratio by 12.9 percentage points over the next 30 years.
Moving on to our optimal healthcare proposals, we begin with universal healthcare. The United States spends the most on healthcare, yet it ranks low in key health indicators such as life expectancy and infant mortality. Our proposal introduces a universal healthcare system that ensures coverage for all while reducing costs. The system must consist of various essential components that can be found in each developed country's universal healthcare system. The National Library of Medicine published a study that investigated the expansion of Medicare for All as the replacement for our current healthcare system. This transition would initially cost $3 trillion and could save over 68,000 lives annually in the US, making the workforce healthier and more productive. Based on the CBO's projection of national health expenditure, over the next 30 years, this proposal would save a total of $14.5 trillion and would reduce the debt to GDP ratio by 11.4 percentage points.
With the introduction of universal healthcare, we propose our universal healthcare system having stronger negotiations leverage as it pertains to drug prices. We have already seen this model work with the Department of Veterans Affairs paying 40 to 50% less for the same medications that Medicare covers. By expanding negotiations of up to 500 of the most expensive drugs, we can achieve greater savings while ensuring everyone gets the medication needed at reduced cost. Over 30 years, that would translate to $3.7 trillion in savings, reducing our debt to GDP ratio by 3.5 percentage points. Universal healthcare has traditionally been supported by the left, but by emphasizing cost savings and foreign investment, it could appeal to fiscal conservatives and pro-business policymakers. The negotiations of drug prices has bipartisan support.
Mental health care is a growing public health concern. We propose expanding funding for certified community behavioral health clinics to $25 billion annually, increasing Medicaid and Medicare reimbursements, and offering loan forgiveness and tax credits to attract specialized professionals. Integrating mental health into primary care can reduce emergency visits, hospitalization, and incarceration rates, especially critical given that 67% of homeless individuals face mental health challenges and 26.8% with substance abuse.
Additionally, research by the National Low-Income Housing Coalition shows that shortage of affordable housing costs the U.S. economy $2 trillion annually in lost wages and productivity. To address this, we recommend boosting the low-income housing tax credits to $30 billion annually and implementing permanent supportive housing to lower long-term government costs and incentivize private investments. Together, these measures are expected to generate $560 billion in extra tax revenue and $940 billion in economic activity while cutting our debt to GDP by 2.3 percentage points.
Lastly, we have workforce upskilling, including H-1B visas, vocational education, and immigration. For the fiscal year of 2025, there were about 470,000 eligible registrations for the H-1B visa program, and only 135,137 were selected. The H-1B visa cap remains at 65,000 applicants and an additional post-undergraduate professionals, which limits the potential for benefiting the U.S. economy. We propose to increase the cap of H-1B visa applicants by an additional 65,000 to grow long-term economic activity, boost productivity, and population growth to increase innovation and job creation. Through increasing the cap, by the end of 30 years, we would see a projected total increase in economic activity of $2.5 trillion, a total reduction in spending of $30 billion, and a reduction in our debt to GDP by 3.4 percentage points.
A strong public education system remains essential in maintaining or growing our economy in a sustainable way. We propose an increase in funding for vocational training in high schools to prepare them for vocational schools. Over 30 years, a total investment of $160 billion would generate $1.97 trillion in growth. The World Bank estimates that every dollar spent on education increases GDP by an average of $20.36. Data from the National Science Board shows that as of 2017, only 17 million out of 136 million Americans were employed in vocational careers. With increased investment, the Bureau of Labor Statistics projects this number could grow to 19 million by 2026, with 2 million job openings in that decade alone. This policy has strong bipartisan support and would not only strengthen our workforce, but also reduce our debt to GDP ratio by 3.1 percentage points.
The United States is home to millions of undocumented immigrants who already contribute to the economy but lack legal status. Our proposal seeks to legalize undocumented immigrants, allowing them to work legally and contribute to tax revenue. Legalizing their status through visas ensures contributions, making programs more financially stable. Historically, immigration reforms have received bipartisan support when framed as an economic issue. Over 30 years, our proposal indicates that the government would generate $2.4 trillion, a reduction in government spending of $574 billion, and a decrease of 2.9 percentage points, landing the final debt to GDP ratio at 92.93% by 2055.
With the political process being nuanced and complex, we included policies that would appeal or receive support from both political parties and the American public. Each proposal addresses major issues and inefficiencies present within our economy. As illustrated in this slide, it summarizes all of the policies which could be appealed to the left, the right, and which policies could be considered as bipartisan.
With our GROW package of proposals, including green infrastructure, regenerative investments, optimal healthcare, and workforce upskilling, they bring our total debt to GDP to 92.93% by the end of 2055. Our plan helps bring the U.S. to a more long-term, sustainable fiscal path by enhancing economic activity, reducing inefficiencies, and nurturing the environment to help the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Team 505. At this time, we will transition to our Q&A, and I now turn it over to our esteemed panel of judges.
I can go first. I have a question that isn't, I really appreciate all of your great slides and the detailed policies that you went over. I had a question about process. How did you all decide what would go into your plan as a whole? Did you meet on a regular basis and each take an issue area, or sort of what went into that process?
Yes. So originally, we split up our group into a presenting and research team. We actually have 3 other researchers. Unfortunately, we're not able to be with us today, but we're hoping for next year. But our researchers, we each individually as presenters also worked on researchers. But we each created first our own individual proposals that we think that we would want to contribute, for the fiscal challenge. And then from there, we picked out, I believe we created like 18 proposals in total. And then from there, we picked the best ones that kind of would complement one another and to create this package of proposals leading to grow.
I'd like to also add on to that. A lot of it in the process was just passion and interest. Our coach really spent time with us and made us explore what we were most interested in. So for things that you knew that you would want to pursue, or something that you knew that you would want to research on, you had the opportunity to go into that. You had the opportunity to do the mathematics behind that. And that was like most appreciated during the process.
Thank you.
I have a question about dynamic effects. Gene Sturley at the Urban Institute talks about giveaways and takeaways in the federal budget process. And it seemed like your presentation was quite heavy on giveaways that will lead to assumptions of massive returns over time. And the only takeaway that I saw was the carbon tax, or the border adjusted carbon tax. Could you talk a little bit more about the assumptions behind the dynamic effects that you put forward today?
Sure. We can actually go back if you'd like. Adil, would you like to begin? Oh, there we go.
Yes. So the idea behind the carbon tax is the most important part of the tax itself is that we're trying to cut emissions. We're trying to build those alliances with other countries to make our manufacturing and construction sector more competitive, given that those sectors already produce a lot less emissions compared to like other countries. And because we're importing so much emissions, we're trying to cut back on that. In considering the dynamic effects of that,
To add on to what my colleague was stating, the reason that we decided to take a lot of, instead of having takeaways of where we would be cutting taxes or other cutting fiscal spending, we decided to do a lot of giveaways because we're trying to grow as our grow package, and we're trying to build a strong foundation for future revenue growth, for future economic opportunity, and future economic efficiency. That's why we focused mainly on giveaways instead of takeaways, as we believe, or our presenting team believes, that by building a strong foundation, it allows you to build up and far surpass any possibilities through takeaways.
Thank you.
So I want to jump off of that same question about how you computed the enormous returns from, as we're calling it, giveaways. So for example, just taking one, I think you had, I was taking notes quickly, but there was one where you had an investment of 120 billion and it turned into trillions. And maybe that's because maybe that's because the returns are over 30 years, and so we're getting a lot of benefit from.
It's the climate resilient.
So for that example, the $120 billion figure that you gave, turning into $1.3 trillion, so we actually got evidence from, if I am correct, the CBO, in finding that for every dollar that you put in federal investments into flood protection and flood damage prevention, you're saving, on average, a return from $7 to $10 in future flood damage that you're mitigating or that you're reducing. And so this proposal focuses throughout the coasts of America, even though the vast majority of flood damage is present on the West Coast and the East Coast. This still includes the coastlines that are present in the Gulf of America.
That's super helpful. I'm going to ask one more. On the H-1B visas,
Oh, yes.
so I was trying to do the calculation quickly, and I wonder if you guys have done it,
Yes.
of how many more people would be working in the U.S. over the next 30 years. So just doing the 30 times 65. And I was trying to figure out how those folks would pay an additional $2.5 trillion in revenues. Or maybe there's like each person makes other people more productive or something.
Yes. Initially, we wanted to expand and to increase the cap of 65,000 applicants for the H-1B visa program, because we can actually see that there's an increase currently in demand within the STEM industry, and specifically, like, they're domestically at least, like, unfortunately, some people may not be as qualified, but overseas, by expanding this cap and by actually having employers sponsor these people once they arrive here with their education and with their current skills, not only would they contribute to tech innovation and just in general economic activity, but they can actually get onto the path of legal citizenship potentially for the future. Now, going as to over the 30 years, you said like how many workers that amount to? I believe around like 1.95 million individuals. Yes. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'm happy to go next here. Do you have any sense of what I would call the big mix in total of where you've increased revenue, where you've decreased spending, where you've increased spending, and where growth, in terms of like what is contributing to the drop to debt to GDP over time? Is there a broad sense of the mix?
Yes.
So as you can see in our growth projections, this highlights each individual proposal. The largest proposals, if I'm correct, one of them is the Social Security Sovereign Wealth Fund. Another one is Government iCloud. And I believe those are our two largest proposals. Those contribute double-digit percentage drops, or percentage point drops.
So how would you classify the Social Security Sovereign Wealth Fund? What category? Is that a decrease in spending, an increase in spending, a increase in revenue, decrease in revenue, or is that affecting growth?
Okay, so it's both an increase in spending and an increase in potential revenues. So the idea is that you're investing the $237 billion over 30 years, which structures into $27 billion the first year to set up a commission of highly trained and Senate-confirmed experts in the field of business or in the field of asset allocation, diversification, to make sure that these assets are being, well, not only invested securely, but you're being invested in safe, long-term planned projects or planned companies. Now, the growth that we're expecting to see, I believe, is annually approximately $185 billion, but by the 30th year, if we're only assuming a 4% return on investments, we would see $300 billion of annual revenues from the growth of the valuation in Social Security assets, which would be liquidated into market securities.
Got it.
I had a follow-up on your immigration proposals, specifically legalizing the undocumented workers. And you've had the great good fortune to enter into this competition during a changing time in the immigration space. Did current plans to deport many of these undocumented workers play into your estimates at all?
So this proposal actually was created before the current policies were implemented. The main reason we included it is because we have declining birth rates and a larger aging population. And in order to address that, we need a growing workforce. And to do that, we decided to legalize undocumented immigrants. And not only that, this also ties in with our vocational education proposal. And by not only bringing them in, they may be low skilled, but by introducing vocational education, we can educate those individuals if they choose not to pursue college, and that can make them better contributors to the economy.
I also would like to add on to my colleague that the vocational education is something that we do tie in with the legalization of undocumented immigrants as well as the H-1B visas, because let's say some of these undocumented immigrants that are currently already contributing to the economy, let's say if they do have some sort of, if they have a bachelor's or master's degree, that means that they could potentially already apply or already qualify for the H-1B visa program. And if so, then they would be able to continue on, working for a company and then getting on the legal path of citizenship. But as for vocational education, we actually wanted to expand the program, not just only for high schools, but also just in general to fund the programs more and expand them more nationally, because not only do we see an increase like in the demand for vocational careers, but we can actually see that these have like successful turnouts. And also just wanted to add that the Perkins V Act was actually initiated in the first term of Trump's presidency. He signed off on it, and it still provides $1.4 billion annually for CTE programs for the for the vocational education. So besides this $1.4 billion, we just wanted to kind of add on to that funding so that we can actually produce long-term economic activity. Thank you.
So let me just ask another question here.
Yes.
Assume we go into a recession tomorrow. Would that change your team's thinking on the timing of implementing any pieces of your plans?
The idea for the timing of our plans is that we're thinking ahead. We're thinking for the future. We're trying to build the foundation. Our GROW policies, our GROW package is designed to grow America, grow the foundations for what we are known for and for the economic backgrounds, the economic opportunities, the economic incentives that push people to work harder, be better, try harder.
Adding on to my colleague, by tackling these inefficiencies today or within the current time, in the long term, we can actually see it would be more of kind of like a cushion fall or like a safety net to see like for the future.
And to, lastly, add up to that, to perceive all these economic challenges now would just be short-term challenges. We're thinking long-term. We're thinking these topics are going to arise eventually, whether it's this administration, whether it's this economic state, these questions are going to come up whether we like it or not.
Thank you. I have another question related to economic effects. So you've talked a lot about the positive economic effects of your policies. Are there any negative economic effects that you guys identified on any even particular narrow margin?
One example of that could be with our improper payments. By reducing fiscal waste, by reducing the government's expenditure on improper payments, there are going to be some negative repercussions. Individuals who are going to expect these payments, or individuals who are going to have abused these payments for economic gain, will of course be hurt in this fallout. And to add on to that, it kind of ties into our government iCloud. By modernizing government infrastructure, by updating our digital sphere to make sure that we're up to date with other companies, other competitors, or other countries, there are going to be some traditional roles that might have to be phased out. But overall, you're focusing on increasing efficiency. So the positives will outweigh the negatives, but they do exist.
Additionally, with the CBAM, I briefly mentioned retaliatory tariffs and economic challenges for developing countries. Those are negative effects that we're thinking short term. Now, research by the World Trade Organization also shows that retaliatory tariffs on green taxes are short-lived, not only because of the nature of the tariff itself, because it places strain on these countries. They're unable to you have to measure the carbon intensity, so how would you do that for each of those products that are coming into your country? The World Trade Organization does the research and it proves that in fact it's going to be short-lived. Additionally, with the economic challenges for developing countries, we drew on the effects of the Trans-Pacific Partnership in 2004 by the 2009 by the Obama administration, where they lowered tariffs for developing countries like Peru, Chile, and Vietnam. So by lowering tariffs, that boosted their GDP by 10%, 10 to 12% within those countries. So with the CBAM, the idea is that as you adopt green technology, you get the opportunity to lower those costs, you get the opportunity to opt out of those tariffs. So we're giving those developing countries long-term the opportunity to compete within the global market.
When you guys are putting together your proposals, how did you think about the role of states, federalism, the boundaries of the Constitution, and how that might apply to the fiscal picture?
Okay, so as we know, there are multi-leveled, there's multiple levels of government, right? There's local, there's district, there's federal, there's state, and each system of government interacts with each other's system. Our idea was that, especially through our proposal of the iCloud technology, by linking the federal government together, it's going to make it much easier, much more efficient for state governments to interact with federal government agencies, for local governments to interact with federal government agencies. The idea is that you're making the ease of information, the ease of access, far simpler so that government bureaucracy, which is traditionally regarded as slow or bureaucratic, we have many examples of, say, the justice system taking years on cases simply due to case mismanagement of the information or of the required documents that a given place needs. By streamlining that, you're able to make it more efficient. You're able to cut down that bureaucracy, that bloat, that waste.
Team 505, your time has expired. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. You are now dismissed.
Thank you.
Thank you.